They're treating India like they're school children who need to be told what to do. And India's the big boy. That moment when the United States said, you will not buy oil from Russia or we will punish you. And India looked back at the US and said, you will not tell us who we can or cannot buy oil from. That was such a cataclysmic moment. Transformational. Is Mr. Trump the kind of person who sometimes will make his decisions based on emotional conditions, on vendettas, on grudges, on that type of thing, non-scientific thinking? Yes, yes. Mr. Trump will watch Fox News and see somebody say something and say, yeah, that's right. Boom, let me do that. And that's no way to make your decisions. The world is changing. And this meeting between Mr. Modi and Mr. Xi and Mr. Putin, to some regard, is transformational. The world is going in a different direction.
Mr. Sanchez, thank you for doing this with us. And I'm going to start off with breaking news over here. The Federal Appeals Court in America sort of ruled that Trump's tariffs were issued illegally, and they've given time till October. So probably for President Trump to sort of mount an appeal in the Supreme Court. How seriously do we take this?
Well, the U.S. court system grinds rather than runs. So the appeals court will make its decision probably unless they file a TRO of some kind where they try to get an emergency injunction. I don't see this happening very fast. I would expect that usually, and I'm not a lawyer, by the way, but I've covered a lot of cases like this, that usually something like this will take a matter of months, unless there is an injunction that is filed to try and hasten it, in which case it could be heard within a matter of weeks. It doesn't surprise me, and I think most thinking people know that there are some real questions in terms of the way that some of these tariffs are being applied. The worst case of all, of course, is the example with Brazil, where Mr. Trump literally came out and said that for political purposes, he doesn't like the fact that the former president, Bolsonaro, was being prosecuted by the courts. So he's going to punish the president now because of what his courts did to the previous president, which seems absolutely crazy. I mean, international guardrails should be respected. It's not my place, if I'm the country's president of X, to be telling country Y or its president what it can or shouldn't do, and then try and punish him with tariffs or sanctions. Which brings us to the India case, which is also extremely preposterous in the eyes of most people.
Yeah. So just going on that, I want to talk about the latest comments by Mr. Navarro, Trump's sort of aide and the architect of these tariffs, where he called the Russia-Ukraine war as Modi's war. How do you see that?
Laughable, absolutely laughable. He's not a very smart man. He's never been regarded as a big thinker. There are people within the United States who are actually geopolitical thinkers and understand why things happen. My country, I love my country, but we are, when it comes to geopolitics and understanding the forces of that geopolitics, especially from a global South community, we are just so dumb, so dumb. Almost, I apologize for my country because we're so dumb. It's embarrassing. They know absolutely nothing about the history of India. They know absolutely nothing about the relationship between India and China and vis-a-vis Russia, or for that matter, Ukraine. And as a result, they make foolish judgments and make foolish statements like that. I think it's really a matter of not knowing. And I think you'll find, now I'm going to surprise you here. While the neocons and the nuts and the war machine and the people who make money by selling weapons are arguing and they're in Mr. Trump's ear and they're trying to convince him at all costs that he has to go after India and he has to go after Russia and he has to go after China. Somewhere down deep, I think Mr. Trump instinctively realizes that if he does that, he's picking the wrong horse in the race. I think maybe because he's a businessman, he understands there's something happening in the world which is transformational. And these countries that used to be the old colonial powers like France and Starmer's country and Merce's country, Germany and the UK, if you look at them and if you measure quantitatively, not opinion, just quantitatively measure what is the size of their standing army, what is the size of their GDP growth, what is their present condition when it comes to inflation, what is the condition in those countries when it comes to wages, up or down, down, way down, right? What is the situation going on with crime in those countries? What are the people in those countries saying about those leaders? I'll tell you what it is. It's 29% for Macron. That's his approval rating. Only 29% of the people in the country approve of him. Starmer's at 23.
I know.
Merce is at 38. So when you look at these countries, first of all, just economically, if you look at the measures, right, they're in a very difficult situation. While the countries in the global south, India, for example, something like 6.8 in GDP growth. Look at China at 5. Even Russia hanging in there like at 3.8 or something like that. The numbers tell this story, right? The world is changing. And this meeting between Mr. Modi and Mr. Xi and Mr. Putin, to some regard, is transformational. The world is going in a different direction. And he who realizes that and understands that and embraces that, and if Trump were smart enough to figure that out, and I think he has, because right now he's kind of been treating the Europeans and the global South community as equals. I mean, he bangs them both, right? He praises them both, and then the next day he hits them over the head with a hammer. But in the old days, presidents used to always kiss the behinds of the European community, and then they'd go really hard against the global South community. In Trump's case, he's kind of treating them almost equally. Not that he's treating anybody well, but at least he's finding that there's some kind of equilibrium when it comes to these countries. The smart move would be to actually go the other way and start embracing more the countries that are more powerful.
I'm glad you talked about neocons. I mean, we saw the list of provocative statements ratcheting up. President Trump has also called India a dead economy as well. And it ratcheted up once Lindsey Graham sort of started talking about sanctioning India, China, etc. So have you seen the neocon sort of agenda sort of take over now? And it's in the Oval Office now?
Of course, it's undeniable. Well, look, the neocons in the United States, and especially the people who make money from the war machine, have been in power in the United States for, well, if you really want to look at it, I mean, I hate to sound too controversial and to mention something that most of us have long assumed. It's been this way since they killed Kennedy.
Yeah.
I mean, since JF Kennedy was assassinated by a lone gunman, the United States, the people who I believe and most smart money agree may have had a hand in his demise, the people who he was going after, CIA, the war machine. I mean, what did he want to do, right? I mean, he wanted to start to defund Israel and kind of demasculate them somewhat. He wanted to end the Vietnam War. He wanted to dismantle the CIA. Tell me who you're messing with, and I'll tell you who's going to come after you. Right? It's pretty simple.
Yep.
And since Kennedy has been gone, every president in the United States has towed the line, as you just suggested, to suit the needs of the neocons. It's as easy as black and white. It's as clear as day.
Yeah.
You could see it, and they're trying to do it with Trump now, and Trump is kind of resisting because his gut tells him, but I don't think he wants to make those kind of waves in the end. So
It's
time will tell.
perplexing for India because, we've seen a continuity in US-India relations for all the way from the Clinton administration. There's been a uniformity all the way up to the Biden administration, and suddenly we're seeing this radical pivot where, in a very short period of time, Trump is using India to ratchet up pressure on Russia. What gives?
Well, I mean, I think it's just disrespectful, especially when you consider, well, it's disrespectful and it's also ignorant. It's an ignorant policy. I'm not calling my president disrespectful and ignorant. I'm
Mm.
calling the policy is disrespectful and ignorant. Ignorant because they don't understand the underpinnings of what caused the Ukraine war from the standpoint of Russia. It's all right there. Anybody who can see the nose in front of their face knows that Victoria Nuland is on the phone, literally fomenting a coup, and to use that coup to create a situation where the U.S. and NATO were getting rid of a democratically elected president
You're
because
talking
they
about
didn't
the
like him
Maidan,
because he was
the
too friendly
Maidan
with
coup.
Russia, right?
Yeah, you're talking
Yeah,
about the Maidan coup where Zelensky came in.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we if and that's important. You have to take that into account when you consider the situation with Ukraine, which I think to some regard Mr. Modi has. So I think that's kind of the ignorant part. Understand what is the genesis of the Ukraine war. So they don't understand that because they've never seemingly wanted to, and because again, certain forces in the United States want us to think that Ukraine, Zelensky is Mother Teresa, and Donald Trump is Hitler, and that's it. You're not allowed to think outside of those two very dumb boxes. So that's the ignorant part. The disrespectful part comes, I think, when you start telling a country like India, with its vastness and its history and its resources and its capabilities, and you start treating them like they're a school child without understanding that these are people. And too many people think India started with Gandhi. All they know about India is Gandhi and beyond Gandhi because it was in a movie. The history of India, the greatness of India, the what India has done for the world in many cases is every bit as important, if not more so, as what we've seen throughout the stories of Europe and Mesopotamia. It's just that the West has never bought into it. So I almost think to a certain extent, if you understand a little bit more about the country, it's about the nation, about its people, and about its history, you'd be less apt to say those types of things. It's almost like they're treating India like they're school children who need to be told what to do. And India is the big boy. India
Yeah.
is not a school child. And I think I keep saying this. I said it with my guest the other day on my show. I'm telling you, that moment when the United States said, you will not buy oil from Russia or we will punish you, and India looked back at the US and said, you will not tell us who we can or cannot buy oil from. That's a decision that we make for the benefit of our people. And by the way, we're a free market country. So we do things based on the spirit of how the free market dictates things. That was such a cataclysmic moment, transformational. I still believe historians will one day look back and say, that's when that model, the power that was started to truly decline and a new power came to be.
Yeah.
The old European US since World War II has run the world, and nobody's allowed to say no. And in that moment, that no started what I think will be the beginning of the dismantling of that system. That doesn't mean that United States, it's in a downfall or anything. I just mean from a power standpoint, it's going to shift to the global south. And I think the premier countries, of course, are going to be India and China, along with Russia and South Africa and Brazil and many of those other countries who are just saying, no, we're just not going to take this anymore. You can't treat us like we're little kids.
And this is the irony, Mr. Sanchez. There was a report from Nafto Raynok, which is a Ukrainian oil analyst firm. For July, Ukraine's imports of Indian supplied diesel were at an all-time high of 15.5%. So there's an argument that is India funding the Ukrainian war machine then?
It's funny. I was reading the same report the other day, and I was aghast. I didn't know that much of that same oil. So to put a cap on your story, just recently, and there's this new brouhaha going on in Europe now, where Orban of Hungary is
Hungary.
very angry with Mr. Zelensky for blowing up the pipeline that
Yep.
is supplying him with oil, the Ruda pipeline that goes from Russia through that part of northern Ukraine, and then it goes into Slovakia, goes through Hungary, and eventually it ends up in Croatia. The funny thing is, he blew up that pipeline, but some of that oil that is now not getting through because he blew up the pipeline is oil that would then be refined and sent back to Ukraine.
Yeah.
So, so I mean, this is dumb. He
Yeah.
actually blew up a pipeline thinking he wanted to hurt his neighbors, which is causing an escalation between him and Hungary. But he was actually also blowing up a pipeline which fed fuel to his own people. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a sort of hypocrisy that we are seeing because so the Biden administration had told India to continue to buy Russian crude to stabilize oil prices. What would happen if India stops buying Russian oil and oil prices spike globally because of that?
Well, remember, in the end, some of the people who don't have the forethought that perhaps you do in the United States, who are trying to, boost their share, their shares of some of these big oil companies, are thinking that if we can just block India from doing that, then we'll be able to send more of our oil through. But the sources that I have spoken with, who I trust both in Russia and outside of Russia, tell me the need for oil in the world now is still massive. It has not gone down. In fact, it continues to go up. And Russia has some of the largest reserves that are completely untapped still in parts of Siberia. They're now developing new extraction ways that is going to be able to maybe get it out a little bit faster. But even if you did that and you brought down the supply,
Yeah.
the demand is still so high that it would cause a huge ripple effect through the global markets, possibly even causing recessions around the globe, including in many Western countries.
Mr. Sanchez, I wanted to understand with you that how do you look at Trump's hypocrisy, especially when there were reports that US and Russia themselves are in talks for several energy deals. And also we have heard from various statements from America, like from Nikki Haley and House Foreign Affairs Committee, who have slammed Donald Trump for singling out India for its purchases of Russian oil and not imposing sanctions on China and Europe, which continues to buy oil and gas from Russia. So how do you look at Trump's hypocrisy?
He's haphazard in his approach. There's no particular rhyme or reason to who he sanctions or why he sanctions them or when he sanctions them. And that's not good. In business, and I've had my share of success in business, I, along with some partners, was able to found a healthcare company, and we were able to take it public. It was a $4 billion company. And if there's something I learned with having a stable business when it comes to having people understand whether they can trust your business and invest in it or buy your shares, for example, is you have to have consistency. You have to have some sense of stability and consistency. One of the problems, which you just underscored with Mr. Trump's approach, is there's not a single business anywhere in the world who really believes when he says 15% or 30% or 45% that that's actually what it's going to be. So if he comes in today at 50%, the business guy running a corporation in Delhi or anywhere else in the world is thinking to themselves, well, that's what he did last time with Brazil, and then he took it back to five. So let's just keep doing what we're doing and not really trust that anything is going to change, because they're really, in the end, just words. So what it does is it doesn't have an effect other than to destabilize the market, and it doesn't make people do what he's really wanting to do. Remember, this is the part that I think, Ayushi, we have to understand. Mr. Trump's stated purpose for these tariffs is because there is no manufacturing in the United States. All the stuff in the world and all the services in the world are being run out of India and Vietnam and China, right? These are the countries that are delivering the goods or delivering the services. He's angry, and he wants to be the president that brings those service jobs back from India to the United States. And and he wants the chips to be made in the United States, and he wants the cars all to be made in the United States. That's cool. That's a good idea. I think good for him. He's right. I wish there was more manufacturing in the United States. Most Americans can't get jobs anymore except working at McDonald's. So it's an earnest idea. The approach, though, isn't working. And why isn't it working? It's not working because of that inconsistency that you just stated. Nobody's going to be coming back to the United States as long as he's haphazard in his approach and he's using his tariffs and his sanctions only for castigatory measures, as opposed to for growth measures, or to be able to find some kind of relationship between these countries where all these companies are. So the problem is, in a word, trust. And in business and in geopolitical relations, if there isn't trust, there isn't growth. And that's the problem with the way Mr. Trump is laying out his tariffs, in my humble opinion.
Over here in New Delhi, it seems like the means to achieve this goal of President Trump means he's essentially cratered a decades-old relationship with India, right? It was always on the up and up. Now, there was a report by Jeffries that is added another dimension now to this, and says that a lot of President Trump's tariffs and actions and the provocative statements that are coming against India is more like his personal peak. The fact that he wasn't allowed to play a mediation role in the India-Pakistan sort of almost like a de facto war that we were in just a few months ago. So the fact that India will not accept third-party mediation in any way with this conflict with Pakistan, are those personality politics also being seen over here?
Well, look, if you're asking me, is Mr. Trump the kind of person who sometimes will make his decisions based on emotional conditions, on vendettas, on grudges, on that type of thing, non-scientific thinking? Yes, of course he is. I mean, one of the things that I begrudge for many American leaders today, and I think it's worse today than it's been in the past, is a failure to want to understand the genesis, the history, the culture, and the conditions of any problem. Their reaction is often based on what they saw on cable news. Mr. Trump will watch Fox News and see somebody say something and say, yeah, that's right. Boom, let me do that. And that's no way to make your decisions. Once again, it's just a very haphazard way to do it. And so if you're asking me, would I be surprised if we found out down the line that somehow he felt personally insulted by the fact that Mr. Modi didn't hail him as the savior of the Pakistan and India conflict? And as a result of that, he was kind of holding it against him. And that's maybe why he's throwing this out. I obviously don't know. Neither do you. Neither does anybody else. Does it fit the way Mr. Trump has kind of carried out some of these policies? Yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. And it's not good.
Yeah, no, let me go in a bit more on this. You see, We saw a few weeks ago all those European leaders line up and sit across him, across the Resolute desk in the office. Do you think leaders like a Xi Jinping or a PM Modi or a Vladimir Putin would also do something similar over there? Because we've seen him warming up to Europe as well now after that.
He's trying to play both sides against the middle. That's what he's doing. He'll slap down the EU and then he invites them to the White House. You know, he slaps down Putin, then he has conversations with him. He obviously doesn't like Zelensky. You can tell when Trump really doesn't like somebody. He does not like Zelensky, and yet he has to. He acts as if he's willing to make him an equal partner in all of the negotiations. So I think some of that comes from people who are in his ear, like you mentioned, Lindsey Graham, who make him go there. And one of the problems we have with the United States right now, and one of the problems the United States has, is in the end, you are how you act, right? You may tell me you're the greatest guy in the world, and you may be, but I'm going to judge you based on your actions, right? How do you behave? How do you treat your wife? How do you treat your children? How do you treat your mother and your father? That's what tells me whether you're a decent human being or not. And the United States right now has a very serious problem with Gaza. The whole world sees that. And whether they're looking at, forget India, forget Russia, forget Ukraine, forget everything. They're looking at that and they're saying, you guys who are backing the extermination of a race of people and funding it and defending it, you're going to go around the world telling other countries what to do. I mean, it's such a horrible starting place right now for the United States, and it really it really undercuts the underpinnings of what the United States has always stood for. So we as Americans look at that, and whether you're on the right or on the left, you look at it critically, and you know that the whole world is looking at it that way too. So it's kind of it's a real stain on the United States right now, and that undercuts Mr. Trump's tariffs and sanctions and all these castigatory measures that he's putting on the world in the end, because I think that gives the guys like Modi and others the opportunity to say, in the past, I may have said, okay, let's work this out. But based on your recent record, I'm just going to say, nah, I'm not interested. Don't tell me what to do.
What about Trump's attitude with China? China is a huge importer of Russian oil as well, and they've sort of escaped those secondary tariffs.
Because we owe them our country. China, I mean, China has loaned us so much that our economy is based on everything China does, not just in terms of the products that 90% of the products in any Walmart, which is where America shops, comes from China. The rest may come from Vietnam and parts of Malaysia, et cetera. But in the end, they make the products and they loan us the money to fight the wars that we then fight in, to be able to keep our production base, which is the only one we seem to have these days, which is the weapons productions going. So it's a very cyclical and weird arrangement where the United States knows that it can't be too harsh on China, because if it rips China up, it rips itself up. It's kind of like a double suicide. And I think Mr. Trump knows that. Part of the story here is that China can punish the United States and is punishing the United States. It's already dumped 300 billion US treasuries. So it's doing its part to devalue the US dollar. The US dollar is at a 27-year low, and China is capable of doing it. And if that's the reason I'm here. I'm here in Beijing. I just got here. I'm going to be covering this Shanghai summit. I mean, think of what happens if Mr. Modi and Mr. Xi and Mr. Putin and several other Asian Pacific leaders come together and say, it's time for us to do just that. Focus on de-dollarization, because that's how you actually win the war, not with weapons. And some of that is already taking place. And yes, I think Mr. Trump understands that. And I think that's why he's a little bit more hands off on China, because they hold so many US treasuries. And if they dump them, they can really damage the US economy.
I'm glad that you brought up the upcoming visit. Of how do you see PM Modi's visit to China? It's happening after 7 years, and he'll be meeting Xi Jinping in Tianjin. And how do you see that? How do you see those visuals play out?
I'm fascinated by it. I'm here because and we've got our crews here, and we're going 100% with the coverage of this story. We think this is a transformational story. We think it's truly and it's all because of Modi. Otherwise, Mr. Putin and Mr. Xi are getting together. Okay, that's not a big news story. It's worth covering, but it's not as big a news story. When Modi made that decision, and I think you guys know the story perhaps better than I do because it's in your backyard. But my sense is that Modi didn't make the full commitment to come here to start this economic embrace, if you will, with the Chinese until after he felt disrespected, or the Chinese government felt, not just about Modi, the Indian government felt disrespected to the point where they started thinking, you know what? Maybe it's time to look to China. Maybe it's time to start developing this relationship that we've had with China. Not that it was ever a bad relationship, but it wasn't an ideal relationship. It wasn't a full embrace. It was just kind of like, hey, how are you?
Yeah.
And I think what's happening now is you're seeing them, and I don't know if it's a Machiavellian play. It might be. This is what we're going to find out this week. Is it a Machiavellian play on the part of Mr. Modi and Mr. Xi? They want to send a message to the world, and specifically to Donald Trump. Look what you're doing. You're creating this union. This union's bigger than you from every measure out there. Be careful who you mess with, because the bigger you make us, the smaller you make yourself. Is that the message they're trying to send? And is that just a Machiavellian play? Perhaps. Or does it go further? And are these guys actually going to sit down to business and say, okay, it's time to go after the big guy. How do we do this? And we probably have to do it economically. And I think that might be part of the discussion. So we'll see what comes out of this.
Yeah, Rick, given the fact that India, Russia, China are part of the BRICS grouping too, do you think that by imposing steep tariffs on India, US is strengthening the BRICS, which Donald Trump is always against?
100%. 100%. The more he singles out the BRICS countries and punishes them, the more the BRICS countries look to unification. And you know who deserves the credit here, I think? Russia. I mean, Putin is a wily character, I think. He's an interesting dude, kind of nerdy and stuff at times, and interesting, but he's very, very didactic, this guy, and I think what he and Soleonov, his finance minister, have done, and I think what these guys in the Kremlin have done is when the U.S. went after them and froze they froze their assets, literally stole their assets, and now the EU freezes Russia's assets, then takes $3 or $5 billion in interest from it, and they give it to Zelensky, which is like, wow, man, that's dirty pool, it seems to me. So they freeze their assets, they get them out of SWIFT, they sanction the hell out of them, they tariff the hell out of them. And what's happening in Russia? They're not only surviving, they've gotten stronger, and they found markets because they thought, oh my God, the Americans aren't going to buy our stuff. Now what are we going to do? The Americans aren't going to run our McDonald's. Now what are we going to do? I talked to the finance minister here in Russia, Mr. Soleonov. He said, Rick, it was the best thing that ever happened to us. Now Russians run McDonald's and Starbucks, and we control our own economy. And we found better partners in India, for example, and we've created these relationships where everything we had is still there. Our GDP growth is up to 3.8. We've got the highest GDP growth in all of Europe. And we're the most sanctioned, most castigated country in the entire world. So here's my point to you, Ayush. I think the point is this: India, South Africa, Egypt, Brazil, all these countries saw this and said, well, maybe the big bad wolf is not so bad. Because, man, they hit Russia with everything they can hit them with, and Russia's still standing. So maybe we can do it too. And what would we do? What happens if we all come together? Then we'd really be standing taller. And I think there's some of that that's going on right now. And I think if people in the West were smart, and they're not, and if people in the, I was just talking to McGregor just a little while ago, Colonel Douglas McGregor. I think he's a very smart man. And we were texting back and forth on the plane, as a matter of fact, when I was coming here. And I said that to him. I said in my text to him, where is he? I said in my text to him, I'm going there. What do you think? And then we went back and forth on the conversation. Well, I can't find it. I'm never good with I'm too old.
You can
My daughter
paraphrase
would
it.
have found it in half a second.
Yeah, paraphrase it.
He says, I said, Doug, do you think, Colonel, do you think, I said, I'm going there because I think it's a transformational moment. And I think these meetings between Mr. Modi and Mr. Xi are so important that they could create a union that we Americans actually helped bolster. We basically are bringing strange bedfellows together, and we're creating the union. And if we're not wise to it, that union is only going to get stronger and stronger. And then I said, Colonel, do you think that our country, our people, our leaders get that? And his answer was absolutely not. They don't understand it. And then that's the problem. It's going to be to their demise. I hope they do. I mean, I hope they listen to people like us and say, be careful. Stop putting all your eggs in the NATO and EU basket. That's those, that nest is dead. Nothing's going to grow there.
And in your opinion, Rick, what is the likely trajectory of India-China relationship over the next decade?
Yeah, I think it's going to improve. I just think over time, these kinds of things go away. I've known Mr. Trump as a politician now long enough to understand that you could say what you want about Donald Trump, but he doesn't really hold these things from a grudge level. He just moves on to the next one. He'll get bored with, attacking India, and then he'll move on to another country, and he'll forget that he even attacked India. So I don't think this has a long-lasting effect. And I think India is smart to hold its ground. I think it's very smart to hold its ground. And I think, it's funny. I think in that moment when Trump said to Modi, do what I say or I will tariff the crap out of you. And suddenly, after that statement, I feel like the whole world leaned in. Yeah. Just to see, now what's going to happen. And they didn't know, because Modi's not my humble geopolitical take on Modi has always been that he's always been more of a pacifier, moderate, go along to get along is the expression. He's the kind of guy who, and it's part of the nature, maybe a little bit of the culture of India, that they're good at being able to find that place where you can live in peace, and they're always looking for that place in the middle without ever having to slap anybody down, save, of course, some of the issues in Pakistan. But in this case, the whole world found out that if you push India too far, India will push back. And they did. And I think it's, once again, I know I keep going back to this word, I think it's transformational.
Mr. Sanchez, do you think that President Trump overpromised the American people? Because after the Alaska summit, one thought that peace was imminent. Summit with Zelensky and Putin was about to happen. But then we wake up next week to news of Russian missile attacks on Kiev, and Ukraine also continuing its aggressive stance. So where do we stand?
It's pretty simple. Russia is annihilating Ukraine. Don't take my word for it. Go read all the military analysts who are studying this war, and they're telling you that they're just moving every day incrementally more and more into Ukraine. It comes down to this. if you don't give Russia a reason to stop, they're not going to stop. They're just going to keep on going because they haven't been given a reason to stop. Russia's just saying, look, the reason we decided to do this is Russia's thinking, right? From the very beginning. We're not comfortable with a country like Ukraine, which is on our border, be like Canada for the United States. We're not comfortable with another country coming in and telling them who should be their president. We're not comfortable with other countries, NATO in particular, which has already gobbled up most of Europe, now gobbling up this country and choosing its president and having military hardware there and from a security and doing military exercises in the Black Sea in front of our beaches. So Russia looked at all these facts and said, look, we're just not comfortable with this. This is scary to us, like it would be to you if we were doing this in Lake Michigan, and taking over Canada and changing the president there for the sole reason that the president was too friendly with Washington. You can't have a friendly president with Washington in Canada. He has to be friendly to China or whatever, whoever, or India, or whoever went in there and did that. I think any country would have felt that provoked in that moment. And Mr. Putin at the time said that. So now we're in a place where Putin says, look, all those things I said from the beginning, that's still all I want. Just promise me you're not going to be NATO. You're not going to put forces there. You're not going to have troops on the ground there. You're going to respect Ukraine, or what's left of it, as a neutral country. Neutral means we don't want them to be pro-Russia. We don't want them to be pro-neutral. And that's his argument, but nobody wants to give him that. They say no. I mean, hell, the Europeans are talking about putting peacekeepers on the ground. Oh, yeah. And you think Putin's going to go along, which means soldiers. So Putin's going to go. The reason they did this was because he didn't want NATO soldiers in Ukraine. So now the solution is give us a ceasefire, stop fighting a war that you're winning. And then on top of that, we want to put Macron's guys in there and Starmer's guys in there and Germans in there. Well, of course that Russia's going to say, no, we will not stop fighting on those terms. You have to at least consider our terms. But it doesn't seem like anybody is. So as long as they feel like nobody's listening to them, and certainly the Europeans aren't, I think Mr. Trump is, then basically the war goes on. And, if this continues, bye-bye Odessa and bye-bye other parts of the country. Remember, look, Trump, Mr. Putin agreed to stop this thing 2 years ago. And if they would have stopped it 2 years ago, all that Russia would have taken were 2 oblasts, right? Yeah. Just 2. Now he's got 5. And if they don't give him more, it's going to continue. It just seems foolhardy to me, just looking at it from outside.
Yeah, Rick, how do you see India's stance when it comes to Russia-Ukraine conflict? The reason why I'm asking you is this because President Putin is expected to be in India by the end of this year for the India-Russia summit. Prime Minister Modi has also invited President Zelensky last year when he went to Ukraine. And we are also expecting Donald Trump to be here in India because India is the host for the Quad. So how do you see this balancing act?
The only problem with, I understand what Modi's doing. It goes back to the Modi way. Modi is a peacemaker, and he's always tried to be that way. Some people will say he's a little too wishy-washy. Some people will say, he's doing the right thing. Everybody's allowed to have an opinion about Putin and Modi and Xi and Trump and everybody else. So I understand it. The only problem where I would be critical of Mr. Modi for playing the middle here, I don't begrudge him for meeting with both sides. I think that's smart, actually. The one thing he should probably note, though, and I think this is important, is Mr. Zelensky has not been elected. So you're meeting with an unelected dude, an unelected leader here. I mean, if we all go by the premise that you got to have a democracy, you can't just call off an election and stay in power. If you call off an election and stay in power, you're not really a democratic country. And, whether he buys this argument that, well, I had to call off the election because there was a war going on. Guess what? Abraham Lincoln did not call off the election when he was president of the United States during the deadliest, bloodiest, most catastrophic, chaotic war in the history of the United States. I mean, it was absolutely shambles with dead bodies everywhere. And he said, no, we will have an election. and he almost lost, won by a whisker, but he had an election. You know, it's like Mr. Trump said to Mr. Zelensky, to Mr. Trump's credit. The other day at the White House, Mr. Trump looked at Zelensky and he said, "Oh, so wait, you're not having elections because there's a war. So the next time we're in a war somewhere in the world, I can just call off the elections and I'm going to stay in power." Is that what you're saying? It was, I don't know if you guys caught that, but it was like,
Yeah.
and if nothing else, I mean, look, Putin, love him or hate him, right? He got 85% approval rating. And that's a polling company that's German, and the Germans hate the Russians. So, she's got like 79%. Modi's approval ratings are high, comparatively speaking, with most of the Western countries. Zelensky's barely in the 50% or maybe high 40s, which means there's a possibility if there was an election in this country, he wouldn't win. And I think that's an important part of what has to be taken into consideration when you meet with him, and meet with Mr. Putin as well. So I would advise Mr. President Modi to consider that.
In conclusion here, Mr. Sanchez, as a journalist covering this summit, when this troika meets, India, China, on the day they meet, what do you think the key takeaways, what do you think will come out of it? And my second part of my question is, the day after, how would Washington, D.C. look at this grouping?
That's a really great question. It's always, we journalists, when our editors give us advancers, write me an advancer on something. You always say, how do you want me to write a story about something that hasn't happened yet? But I get it, because it's such an anticipatory story that we have to kind of start to realize that the magnitude, if some key announcements do come out of this. I think both Mr. Modi and Mr. Xi are smart enough to know that the whole world is watching. And I think because they know the whole world is watching, they will be sure to carefully align their message. So it will essentially say to the world something that sounds like, we are now together as nations, and we will work together both economically and in every other way to try to strengthen our union. And that's the message that in and of itself, it's almost like saying, we're going to be brothers moving forward in much or all of what we do, especially economically. And that is the general message that I would expect they would release, because they have to. Otherwise, why do it? The specific, that's the macro, right? If you get into the micro, I would not be surprised to hear them. I would not be surprised to hear them address something regarding the currency issue, where they start to talk a little bit about how these two countries can either use either one of their currencies to somehow form a currency that starts to compete against the US SWIFT and other banking systems, and obviously, some sense of de-dollarization. Because
India stayed clear of that, by the way.
That's what will send shivers down the backs of Wall Street, for example, which then will send shivers down the back of Mr. Trump.
Yeah. A couple of things over there. There is a bit of trepidation with the word brotherly relationships with China, because that was promised in the past, and we've had wars with them. And
I get it. I get it. Well said. You're right. No, you're right. You're right. It's not as easy as shaking hands and coming out of it, because you do have the border clashes that we've seen too many of, or plenty of, let me say. I mean, not be judgmental.
Washington, D.C., how would they look at it? Do you think Trump will continue the way he is, or will he take a step back?
I think we're at the point where there's enough people in the West who are starting to see this and starting to recognize it. And this will likely be the blowout of that idea, of that perception, the wrong words. The right word is recognition.
Mm.
I'm telling you, I mean, Ishan, I'm telling you that there is no recognition of the global South or of BRICS or of China or of India's power in the United States. If you stop the average American on the street in Kansas or Wichita or wherever the hell, and you ask them about BRICS, they wouldn't even know what it is. And that filters through the politicians and everything else. And that's why this is important. That's why I think the macro is probably the biggest part of this. Somehow Xi and Modi need to come out of this screaming to the world from the highest mountain with a microphone. We're here. We're big. We're strong. And we need to be paid attention to. So the New York Times and CNN and Fox and all these people where I used to work start paying attention to them and start letting part of the American national conversation be about, do we need to start paying attention to these people? Because all we do is kiss Europe's butt. Why don't we start maybe becoming friendly with these guys too? Because they look like they're pretty big people over there. And that's kind of what I think needs to happen to a certain regard. And I think it will. I think we're at that point. I mean, look, that's why I'm here. I think the best stories in the world are in this part of the world right now. And that's why I'm enjoying covering these stories, because I'm getting access and telling stories here that I would never have been able to tell in the United States. And I think that's important, which is why, interestingly enough, why my biggest audience seems to be in the West. It's in the UK and in the United States and in Canada, as well as India, by the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time. That was fantastic. Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you so much.
No, I'm honored. You're good guys, and I think you guys do fantastic work, and keep up the good work, and I'm here for you for whatever you need.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Have a good summit.
Thank you. God bless.